Welcome to the Blast Zone, the podcast where we dig up the bombs that shook Hollywood and try to find out why they went up in flames. This week, you ask, we answer. It's Blast Me Anything. Welcome to the Blast Zone.
Welcome to the Blast Zone.
We are not a podcast about bad movies. We are a podcast about movies that did badly.
That's right.
I am Jon Drake, in-house film critic of my Letterboxd account.
And I'm Ian Dukes. I'm a person with thoughts and feelings, and some of them are about movies.
Movies like movies, which we'll be talking about today. Because we're not covering a specific movie today. This is our long-awaited, by us at least, mailbag episode. We've done one of these before. It was like 3 years ago, maybe more.
Yeah.
So it's been a long time. And it was a good time to revisit that after the absolute sprint that was the month of January to get 5 recent movies in the can.
Nice change of pace. It's been a long time. The mail has piled up right up front. Got to say thank you to the fans. I feel like fans is a strong word. Thank you to the listeners of our show.
The Blastoids.
The Blastoids who have shown just enough interest for us to do this. It's fun to do. Lets us give some more opinions on stuff, reveal a little bit more about ourselves, perhaps.
Yeah, I feel like the problem with us is that we're very mysterious. We don't often let facts about our personal lives slip into the show at all.
Yeah, no, this show is just facts, numbers.
Very clinical. There's not a lot of room for personal anecdotes and tidbits, if you will.
No one would ever suspect that I have a yearning for the sea until I reveal it in this very episode.
I mean, somebody suspected it because there's a question about it specifically.
That's true.
But we did decide before we got into the questions, we were going to try to follow the usual format a little bit. So did you happen to watch anything this week that you wanted to share with the listeners before we got into the questions?
I did. I watched something that I really liked. A movie called Challengers was released back in March 2024. I was going to say it's director Luca Guadagnino's latest movie, but it's not. He already put out Queer with Daniel Craig in September of 2024. And unfortunately for us and for him, both those movies were critically praised, but they got shut out. Total of 0 Oscar nominations between the two of them. And as I was watching Challengers, I was kind of shocked because I was telling myself, like, this feels like art. This is entertaining filmmaking that's elevated to a higher level. It is a super fun movie. It's highly entertaining in no small part due to the charisma of the 3 leads, who are Zendaya and Mike Feist and Josh O'Connor. They're all really good. And Guadagnino just is absolutely like bathing in their charm. He's reveling in it. He's getting the best out of them. The filmmaking has this cheeky energy that perfectly matches the script and the energy from the actors and the energy that he got from Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross, who created this really kick-ass techno-electro synth score. That's another big part of the movie's energy. It feels like everyone is on the same page in this movie and they're all going for it. And it just adds up to something that I really enjoyed.
The score specifically is where I've seen the most outcry about it getting shut out at the Oscars. A lot of praise for that in the news and the podcasts we listen to about movies.
Yeah, and I wondered because I heard that praise first and then I watched the movie and I'm like, oh, the score is a character in this movie. It is front and center. You notice it. It calls attention to itself, but in a great way. It's really fun.
I feel like that's kind of the Reznor and Ross trademark because that's a similar thing to what you heard about the Social Network's soundtrack when it first came out.
Right.
But yeah, you know, they just can't nominate everything. We got to give Emilia Perez 13 nominations and then watch their whole Oscar campaign crater itself within a couple weeks.
When I brought that movie to show and tell, I was already slightly uncomfortable with the backlash that it had received. It got way more. The star, the lead actor in that movie, she got way more unpleasant online. And at least it's going to be an interesting Oscars to see how the Oscar voters react to that.
How aware they are of this, because it's a very online group of people that are more or less up in arms. And the Oscar voters don't skew that way typically. But just as a side note, apropos of nothing, if you guys are getting a little famous, even just the smallest amount of fame, do yourself a favor and please hire somebody to scrub your internet presence. Because people keep saying words like tweets from Emilia Perez star unearthed or uncovered. No, they were just there. There was no excavation done to find these heinous opinions. So just fucking be smart.
Yeah, you would think it would just be like a default job at movie studios, at companies in general.
Every agency should have like a team of people that just scrub social media. Like anytime somebody gets cast in their first big role, do a quick audit on their social media presence.
Talk about an agent falling down on their job of not protecting their clients.
Also, she's a grown-ass woman and is responsible for the things she says.
Like, we kind of want to know what kind of people are behind the art that we consume. And then we often regret finding out, but this is life in the 20, whatever century this is. I lost count.
The last one.
The final century, they called it.
The final century. We got off on a tangent there, but...
yeah. Did you happen to watch anything?
I did. I watched the movie After Hours. No, I'm kidding. We were just joking that the only movie I've watched since the last time we recorded was After Hours, which is next week's episode. I can't exactly bring that for show and tell, but movies are not the only thing you can watch.
Oh.
Did you know that?
I'm learning.
I watched and rewatched and watched YouTube videos and read analysis on a little show that's having quite a moment right now. It's called Severance.
Yes.
And I know you had watched it a little bit when it was first airing back in, what was it, 2021, 22 maybe?
It was ages ago.
It was like 3 years ago, and then strikes happened. Everyone involved is pretty in demand. It's not a cast of just workaday TV actors. You got people like the star of Madam Web, Adam Scott, popping up in there.
Is he?
So
got bigger fish to fry, bigger spiders to catch.
I don't know why I resisted Severance for so long. Not the act, although it has its appeal for the outies anyway. I don't know. Every time I saw it, I would kind of roll my eyes. I think I thought it was going to be more comedic than it ended up being, because no, it's pretty grim. It has its funny moments for sure, because you have people like Zach Cherry and Adam Scott and John Turturro and Christopher Walken, who are all very funny actors. But as much as I enjoy a show like From, which is a mystery box show to be certain, you really do see the seams where it's like you're constantly hoping that they know where they're going with it and it's going to end up in a satisfying place. I don't have those fears with Severance because everything is so measured and considered that you're like, all right, these guys know exactly what they're doing and where they're going to end up. And even if the destination isn't to your liking, the tracks have been laid well in advance of the train coming down. So it feels like a fully thought out, fleshed out story, enthusiastically told. Like you can tell everyone involved is all the way in on it. And it does a great job of not just piling mysteries on top of each other, but giving you answers while also bringing up new angles to interrogate. It's kind of the platonic ideal of a mystery box show. And, you know, I'd be shocked if the ending comes and they fumble it.
Don't jinx it. But yeah, it's a smart show. And I love that thing that you say about it. Now, I started it years ago and I bailed out. And because you got into it and so many other people are getting into it, I decided to pick it back up again. But I haven't gotten through it as fast. So I'm only like halfway through the first season. I got a lot of catching up I got to do quick because spoilers abound online and I'm trying not to get it spoiled. But that intelligence with which it's composed and written, it's like a skill level thing. Only the best writers and shows can achieve that, where they can actually give you payoffs. They don't have to string you along. They can give you payoffs and go, but guess what? There's so much more in the tank you don't even know. It's just like a really satisfying type of story to watch.
Yeah, I got my sister into it now and she breezed through the whole series in a week. But season 2, episode 3 ends with something that is a season finale level event for any other show.
Ooh, okay.
And they just sneak it into the 3rd episode. Like it really is a question of confidence in your ability to keep people invested. And they have it and it shows and it's refreshing. I'm also watching a show called Paradise with Sterling K. Brown, which is another kind of mystery box show. But I'm watching that one with reservations because it's good. It's entertaining. It's well made, but there's something at the heart of it that doesn't fully believe in itself.
Yeah, they're rare shows. And what a delight that finally something on Apple TV didn't get buried and forgotten. Like, it's just nice to see that people are doing great work over there. And at least in our online community, it feels like everybody's trying to watch it right now.
Yeah, it's crazy that a season of The Morning Show costs $400 million to make and nobody fucking watches it. Although I have watched all of The Morning Show.
You were the guy.
I'm the one guy, but I don't have Apple TV, so do with that information what you will. So, Ian, are you ready to dig into some questions?
Yeah, basically, I'm wide open. I would even say you could blast me anything.
Hey, it's the name of the show. So our first question comes from Craig, a name listeners may be familiar with.
For sure.
And he asks, what blockbuster do you think would be a bomb in today's theater environment? And it's a pretty open-ended question because we have 100 years of blockbusters to pull from.
That's true.
And it seems like now is one of the more precarious moments in the movie industry's history, where I would say you could probably bet that a majority of blockbusters from the history would bomb today.
That's true. It's a very hit or miss time. Should I go first with my pick?
We didn't talk about these beforehand, except for one answer where we know we have the same answer. So I'm really scared now that you're going to, but yeah, go for it.
Okay. So I picked this one out of a hat because like you said, there's probably a lot to choose from. I had this idea in my head that in the 80s, there were all these straight ahead contemporary dramas or comedy dramas that became blockbusters. It made sense. It was more of a monoculture back then. People would just see, oh, this movie has the stars I like in it, and this is what we're all going to just go and watch. And then if they were good movies, they could do huge numbers. So in 1988, Rain Man won Best Picture disaster. It made $355 million on a $25 million budget. Inflation adjustment says that's $900 million in today's money.
It's wild. $1 billion.
Which is huge. Like, it was an expensive movie. $25 million budget scales up to $70 million. So for like a contemporary drama, that's a pretty big budget. And that's why I picked this one as like, oh, that could have had trouble earning that back. Tom Cruise was already a star. He had done Top Gun and Color of Money. Dustin Hoffman was still a big star. This was only a few years after Tootsie. So this is a big budget for this kind of movie. I checked the other 80s movies, same kind of budget as like Rambo, Temple of Doom, Back to the Future, like big action and sci-fi and movies that you understand where the money goes. But for my justification on this, I looked through the top 50 box office movies of the 2020s so far. And as you would expect, it's almost all franchises, animated movies, superheroes. And I looked through like a list of the top earning movies in the straight up drama category. And there's only one movie since 2020 that earned double Rain Man's adjusted $70 million budget. And that's last year's It Ends With Us.
Interesting.
Which I didn't realize was that kind of moneymaker. I don't know if that movie was a success on its own terms. I intentionally don't know a lot about that movie. But anyway, yeah, those are my numbers. And that's my pick for Blockbuster Bomb.
A good pick. Another reason it would bomb today is just because, not to get all blazing saddles about it, but I don't think you could make Rain Man today. There's the question of how autism is portrayed in Rain Man.
It would be much trickier for those reasons too.
Yeah, but I went further back. I went way back to 1939.
Ooh.
And I picked Gone with the Wind.
Wow.
At the time, the highest grossing movie of all time. But the thing that really grabbed my attention is that it had a $4 million budget in 1939, which is about $90 million today.
That's a big budget.
So a 4-hour romantic epic drama that cost $90 million. I guess the closest, we still see this every few years. We had it in 2024 with Fly Me to the Moon, where we had kind of a big star-studded, big budget romance that did hit theaters. And lo and behold, it was one of the biggest bombs of the last couple of years.
Yeah. So much of a bomb that I'm like Googling it right now to remember what the heck that was.
It was Channing Tatum and Scarlett Johansson. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, apparently. Unless you've staged an elaborate series of fake sites to convince me this is a real movie.
I have been known to edit Wikipedia for my own nefarious reasons. If you remember the name of the rat is Ratatouille controversy of 2019, where I changed it real quick and took a screenshot and then kept spreading that misinformation all over Twitter. Yes, I don't think there's just an appetite for these kind of movies anymore. We've seen historical romances, like Allied was another big one from a couple years ago that fell flat on its face. It's just a type of movie that has fallen out of favor with audiences, not even to mention Gone with the Wind's legacy is also complicated.
Oh, for sure.
Much more so even than Rain Man's. There's a lot of things about it that wouldn't fly today, which it's an easy thing to dunk on a movie that's almost 100 years old and be like, could make that today. But I just think the audacity of making a 4-hour epic romance that cost $100 million to make, and it's somehow being a success, that's a once in history kind of gamble that paid off.
It's funny how that's such an iconic movie in the canon of great movies, but like it is kind of a unicorn. It's pretty unique. And we had a historical, serious, long, heavy drama unicorn with Oppenheimer.
Yeah.
That's the comparison that came to mind, is like once in a while, for some reason, the public can get overly excited about something that seems way too flowery. But yeah, we could have said Oppenheimer would bomb if you made it today, and that would probably be pretty accurate.
Because we wouldn't have Barbenheimer. Although I'm always skeptical about how much of a role that really played in either movie's success. But it is fun to watch studios flounder trying to artificially make the next Barbenheimer situation happen.
Probably not going to happen again for a while.
Probably not. The next question is along the same lines, comes from Van, and he asks, what is the best / your favorite movie that in your opinion could not or would not get made today?
Yes.
And do you mind if I start here?
Definitely, go ahead.
Another one where I'm scared that you're going to have the same answer as me. I said Walk Hard.
That's fun.
A movie that we both love. We have covered it on the podcast. I promise all our answers are not just going to be movies we've already covered. But Walk Hard for a couple of reasons. One is just that Walk Hard is so much more than a movie. There is this very polished, very well-made soundtrack that goes along with it, with many songs that don't even appear in the movie.
Yeah.
So there's all this kind of auxiliary work that went into it. John C. Reilly just rocking the shit out with his performance as a musician, never mind as a character.
Yeah.
And then it's also, if Walk Hard had been successful, I think it could have really shifted people's opinions about musical biopics. But because it flopped, we kept getting Bohemian Rhapsody Cities and Respects and these kind of cookie cutter bullshit ass musical biopics. I feel like now studios would be more like, we're not going to release this movie because it has the potential to take away a cash cow from us.
Another reason it wouldn't get made is like it was the culmination of a certain form of national frustration that had built up from a time where it seems like for years, the biggest movies year to year were these cheesy formulaic music biopics.
Certainly like they were awards movies for a good stretch of years, even if they weren't necessarily the biggest moneymakers like Walk the Line and Ray. Like they all did good work at the award shows.
Yeah, they were the prestige movies of that era, and Walk Hard was like a giant sneeze that kind of tried to flush all that noxious pollen out of its sinuses, but because it didn't hit big, it didn't really succeed. It succeeded with people in the know, but they sort of took a pause and they're right back at it, and the Bob Dylan movie is being praised, and maybe rightfully so. I haven't seen it yet, but it seems like Hollywood, to whatever extent it was shocked by Walk Hard, it reset itself.
Walk Hard has the legacy now of me and you can watch the Elton John biopic and just be like, oh, they're doing When Dewey Moves to Vegas in the 80s. Like, we're doing that part now. But yeah, it didn't seem to gain any real foothold with the mainstream audiences. It's a textbook cult classic now. But if it had been more successful, it could have had a pretty rough impact on some studios.
So you can't quite make it again today, but it seems like we might be on a track where in some number of years it'll be necessary to do that same kind of thing. Maybe not with that genre, but with some other overinflated movie genre that needs skewering.
And I guess you can put Popstar in the same boat, but that was more of a combination biopic concert documentary because those were the popular musical movie of the day in the 2010s, like the Justin Bieber Never Say Never, or even like the Eras tour that just was such a big hit with Taylor Swift. So what did you have for this one?
So I tried to pick something more provocative. I'm going with Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Ooh.
A little movie that you might have heard of. Because I'm thinking of it like an original IP action movie, big budget, big expensive star that has a corny, old-timey aesthetic that's like old guy boomer stuff, you know?
100%.
It's just like, that seems like a non-starter these days. And now it is IP, so it seems like, well, it's obvious you would make that. But I couldn't think of other examples that have gotten made sense that weren't tied to some other IP and really are a no-brainer to greenlight and make the movie.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, even that IP isn't a sure thing anymore because the last Indiana Jones movie was a pretty big flop.
That's true.
For the studio. But while you were talking, I looked it up. $20 million budget for Raiders of the Lost Ark, which seems modest for 1981 for that level of movie. But yeah, I really do wonder. Maybe The Mummy would be the closest, but that's not even that long after Raiders of the Lost Ark. Like, that's not recent. The Mummy with Brendan Fraser, I mean.
Yeah, that played on that same aesthetic and it did it well. But again, that's IP. The Mummy was not new. There was another reason to trust that movie. It's so weird that Raiders came out of literally like nowhere.
And Raiders is not the easiest movie. I think none of the Indiana Jones movies are as silly and popcorny as their reputation would have you believe if you'd never seen one.
Yeah.
I was scared of a lot of the Indiana Jones movies as a kid.
Oh yeah, me too. Definitely. That was what was great about it. It was a great balance of excitement, scary and funny and cool.
And even the bad guys in Raiders of the Lost Ark are not like gun runners or jewel thieves. They're fucking Nazis.
Yeah.
It's pretty high stakes. And obviously the first three Indiana Jones movies are all-timers, but I think you're onto something here.
I'm glad we got it when we did. It was a great boon to popular culture as a whole.
And we got many more years of grumpy-ass Harrison Ford shepherding us through, because now he's the Red Hulk, and I love every quote he gives about it.
Gonna have to see that. I still won't believe it till I see it.
So now we had an interesting question from Aaron. He asked, what studio has the most bombs? Which is a tough question to answer, because it's really a straight-up question you need to research.
Right.
We're not Google, Aaron, but
yeah, we don't do any research for the show.
I don't know what you think you're doing here. No, so it was an interesting challenge to come up with a answer for this. And there's really a few different ways you can approach it. One way is the most bombs just by numbers. Then you could have the biggest bombs of all times or the most impactful bombs.
Yeah.
What did your research unearth?
Well, let me tell you, I went deep on this. My research consisted of messaging you to go, hey, what studios had the most bombs?
Yeah, essentially, the answer I was able to come up with is that it's probably between Warner Brothers and Disney. Warner Brothers may have a slightly larger number of bombs, but because of the budgets associated with Disney movies, their bombs tend to be the largest / most impactful ones.
Yeah.
Like John Carter, The Lone Ranger, those are both Disney movies, two of the biggest bombs of all time. But then you look at Warner Brothers, they have all the DC movies that have landed flat on their fucking face in the last few years. That's got to count for something.
I looked that up. So when you clued me in on who to look at, I started browsing those lists from Disney and from Warner Brothers. And just that DC failure list is like, oh my God, I forgot about that one. I forgot about that one. And we've covered a handful: Joker, Birds of Prey.
We got more coming too, but we have not covered Aquaman 2, Blue Beetle, The Flash, Black Adam, Shazam 2.
Oh my God.
These are all in the last 3 years, I think. And most of those are 9-figure losers.
It's kind of stunning. It makes you go, how are they still in business? What's propping up that enterprise at this point?
HBO Max and James Gunn's reputation, I guess.
And the creative tax accounting of Warner Brothers senior management.
Didn't his Suicide Squad movie kind of flop because it didn't get a full release?
Oh, really? Was that a COVID movie?
Because the 2016 one was the first one.
First was the David Ayer.
Yeah, which was a hit, but a really hated movie.
Oh, yeah. James Gunn's The Suicide Squad was 2021.
Yeah, cost $185 million, only made $169. So that was a bomb. It was attributed to COVID-19 and the fact that it also got a simultaneous release on HBO Max.
Yeah, industry was pretty jacked.
Like, what was the last DC movie to be a hit? Let's see.
Yeah, did the Batman earn money?
Yes, the Batman did. Maybe not as much as they hoped because we still haven't gotten that sequel. But then, yeah, it went, hold on, let me go back.
Okay.
So it seems like they were doing their thing when they had the first Suicide Squad, Wonder Woman, Justice League. Well, Justice League bombed. And then we go Aquaman, Shazam, Joker. I think all pretty decent hits, especially Joker.
Okay.
But then we go Birds of Prey, Wonder Woman 84, which was a huge failure, the Snyder Cut, which was only in theaters for a couple weeks, the Suicide Squad, the Batman, Black Adam, Shazam, Fury of the Gods, the Flash, Blue Beetle, Aquaman, and the Lost Kingdom. So that's one out of the last 10 movies that they've released. That's wild.
But it makes sense when you go through them in that order that they had some pretty good triumphs early on and they're like, okay, now we're going to milk this. And they just failed with the sequels and the follow-ups.
It really is a testament to like that steadying hand of a Kevin Feige and also taking their time, because if you remember that Justice League movie, they really tried to shoehorn the entire team into that Batman versus Superman movie that came out before it to be like, we only have one movie to build up to an Avengers level movie.
Right.
Whereas Marvel did Iron Man, Thor, Iron Man 2, Captain America 2, Thor 2, the Hulk, before it had an Avengers movie. And those are not like A-list Marvel characters either. I'm going off on a tangent here, but let me cook. Like you could say Aquaman doesn't have the same name recognition or the Flash doesn't have the same name recognition, but like Iron Man wasn't a huge deal in comics before the Iron Man movie came out. Like these were like the B tier characters. They'd already sold off the rights to their A-list characters like the Fantastic Four, the X-Men, Spider-Man. Spider-Man. He's an accountant. So DC really is responsible for my answer to this question, which is that it's Warner Brothers, in my opinion, because they fucked up real bad.
But not to draw this one out, but I would recommend people to actually do that Google search and take a look at the Disney bombs. There's so many glossy, shiny, incredibly expensive looking movies that you forgot existed.
Yeah.
It's like they're just pouring money down the garbage disposal. It's crazy.
But like one Frozen can pay for 5 of those bombs probably, you know? Like all you got to do is hit once in a while with the level that they operate at. All right, next one comes from one of our frequent guests. He'll actually be appearing again in the next couple months. Ron decided to write into us. First, he wrote to the Blast Zone email and he said, and I quote, "Did you see that thing under there?" And then he responded to himself and said, "I just made you say underwear, you idiot." So,
man,
fuck off, Ron.
We got pranked.
Yeah, I've been had. And then he responded to that and said, the real question, which is, do you ever hope an upcoming movie fails so you get to cover it?
That's a good question.
Good question. It's a complicated one. And I thought maybe the most about this question.
Tell me your thoughts.
It's a bit of a conundrum. We've often mentioned on the show, and it's just baked into the premise that we have to talk about the difficulties of the movie industry. And when a movie fails, there are often ripple effects for people's personal and professional lives. People can't get jobs after that, or they can't get high paying jobs, or they have to find another line of work. So it is hard for me to root against any movie, but there are exceptions.
Okay.
I think that if a movie is like a moral failing, that it exists at all, then that's fine if it fails. And when I say that, I mean like any Roman Polanski movie made after he fled America, everybody who worked on that movie knew who he was and what he had done and like what they were signing up for. Everyone had open eyes. So I hope all his movies fail and lose money. And then you look at a movie like The Flash, which when that movie was greenlit and probably started filming, that cast and crew really had no idea what they had signed up for. And then Ezra Miller went on a rampage. But if you were going to make a movie with Ezra Miller as the star filming in a month, I hope that movie fails.
Yeah.
I didn't hope The Flash failed because, like I said, when people signed on to that, they didn't really know what was going on. But if you have all the information you need to determine that these are bad people that stand to profit from this movie succeeding, then I think it's okay to root against it.
I think you've made a good argument for when it's morally correct to root for a movie to fail. But I would say to the second part of Ron's question, so that you get to cover it, those are the movies that we actually don't really look forward to covering, right? The ones where the filmmakers are problematic, the movie itself might be ugly or uncomfortable. That's not that fun for us.
Yeah.
So I think we both agree that we would root for those to fail and then conveniently forget to put them on the schedule.
Like a movie like That's My Boy, which maybe I don't have anything personal against the people involved in making it, but I take a moral objection to the actual movie and its premise and its existence.
Yeah, but we didn't know till we watched it that it was going to be so objectionable to us personally.
Right. Sometimes the most fun episodes are the ones where we really don't like the movie, but that is one that I don't think was fun because we disliked it in a different way.
We were upset for real. I would say for the reasons you said, I don't root for movies that I like to fail because I want my favorite filmmakers to keep making movies. But there are some that I have mixed feelings about. Some of my directors I really like, David Lowery, Robert Eggers. I'm like, oh, The Northman failed, so that's kind of cool. We get to cover it, right? We get to try to tell people about it. So it's a bittersweet feeling.
Yeah, and it's more bitter than sweet the less time has passed since its release. Like the Northman we covered pretty soon after it had been released. So it was like David Eggers was probably still, am I going to be able to make another movie? Robert Eggers was probably having a little bit of anxiety about the future of his career at the time. But if it's a movie from the 90s, you're like, everyone probably came out of this okay.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, good question, Ron. But fuck off for tricking me into saying underwear. Then we got a couple questions from Tim. He wrote in with a whole list. So,
oh, thank you, Tim.
We tried to split these up thematically. But his question is, when I went back to the early episodes, I noticed that the format has largely been the same. What was the process like developing the show sections in general format? And it was not easy. There was quite a bit of discussion and trial and error. How many times did we record, John Carter? Was it 3 times?
Did we? I don't even remember that.
We definitely did it more than once.
I remember some of that period where we were tossing around ideas. We were both eager and excited to do this. And I remember you took a bunch of inspiration from your favorite movie podcasts like Big Picture and Blank Check, which you then turned me on to. And I'm like, yeah, these are the good pods. We should try to copy some of the good things that they do. But it did feel like it just came together real fast. And if anything, I was like, oh, looking back, I'm like, I wish we got our feet under us a little bit more before we started putting episodes out into the world. But, you know, it's how it goes. You launch and you make it work.
I do remember the biggest point of debate was whether or not we were going to do the plot synopsis.
Okay.
We waffled back and forth on that a lot, whether or not we wanted to walk the listeners through the story of the movie or if we just wanted to talk around it as more of a discussion-based show. I'm really glad we ended up with the format we have just because it makes the episodes much more accessible to people who have not seen the movies, maybe don't have any intention of it, like they just want to listen. You could listen to the show sight unseen and still understand exactly what's going on. And I think that's important. It keeps people engaged.
I like that that's part of the value that we offer, that it's a fun way to experience a movie. Hopefully it's fun. It's a way to experience a movie that you haven't seen, but because we walk you through it, you can get on the same page with us. And it's fun for us. I mean, the thing is, if you talk around the movie, then your podcast, it's not that much about the content of the movies. And we like movies because we like what's in the movies, not just the business of the movies. So it's fun to just dive right into the middle of them.
It also gives us a freedom to cover movies that are under the radar or difficult to stream or watch, because in another situation, if you don't get that granular about the story of the movie, doing a movie like Strange Days would be impossible because no one can really watch it. But now we can just explain it to you. And also stay tuned for Strange Days.
Nice. Yeah, I would say the one thing about the development of the show, the segments, the format, the really big important thing was from the start, you and I were both in sync that we knew we wanted there to be structure. We liked podcasts with solid structure. We both realized that when you turn on a podcast that doesn't have structure and the hosts are just chatting and meandering around, like those are just hard to listen to.
Yeah.
We both always want our listeners to feel like we know where we're going. We respect their time and attention. We're taking them there in an orderly fashion, and it's dense with content and entertainment. Hopefully we deliver a little bit of that.
I like to think we do.
Yeah, I think so too.
This one is pretty much just for you, which me saying that kind of answers answers the question. But Tim also wanted to know, where did the deep voice joke bit come from? Is it a character with a name?
Oh, man, it should have. When I saw that question, I'm like, oh, man, we should have named him. He should have a little cartoon character. But I think it's a little too late to create lore around that. I just call them deep jokes just because I tend to need shorthand for stuff. I don't even remember doing the first ones. I think we both were like, oh, the monologue might get long. Yeah. And so like it made sense to like, oh, well, here's a little thing we could do to break it up. And I think from the start, I was always a little concerned that I was being disrespectful to you, John, but this is your segment. You're talking here. And I'm like chirping in with stuff. But I think we struck a tone that feels good to both of us.
Yeah, it's even to the point now where, and not often because I respect Ian as a master of the deep voice joke.
It's true. He's the master.
But there are occasions where I'll be writing the monologue and I'll be like, deep voice joke about this.
Yeah.
Not often.
Well. No, but it is collaborative. And I don't know, it's fun that it just kind of evolved. And yet now it's one of our signature things.
It also gives me a little bit of direction when I'm writing the monologue. So I'm like, I don't have to try to be overtly funny here. I can dragnet this, just the facts.
Yeah.
Is that even from Dragnet or am I misremembering?
No, I'm pretty sure that goes back to the original TV show.
Okay. But so I'm like, I know I could just give the play-by-play of the movie and Ian's going to make it funny in post. Fix it in post, as as Detroiters say. You're going to want to digitize it. So thanks for coming up with that.
Oh, yeah.
I think it is one of our signature things. I'm pretty proud of it.
Me too.
All right. This is another one that I feel like is going to be a much more Ian-centric question because if you've been a long-time listener, this man has lived many lives. But Matthew is asking, where did you come across your technical knowledge of the movie industry? You seem to have a good grasp on what makes a bomb enjoyable or a slog. And you actually have worked in the movie industry a little bit.
I mean, I worked at the edges of it in website design for movies. I don't know that taught me anything. That helped me get a few trivia questions correct once in a while. I feel like, John, you're the movie buff. And as I say, I'm just a person with thoughts and feelings. And I've learned a lot since we started the podcast because I'm like, oh, I just committed to this thing that I don't know enough about to sound like an expert. So I started reading books on the movie industry and watching documentaries and stuff. But your familiarity with your scope of your movie knowledge and experience still greatly outweighs mine.
Thank you. I have always had an interest in how things work and not just whether or not they do, which is just to say that when I started watching a lot of movies and I really found myself becoming a movie fan in a big way, it wasn't enough for me to just seek out movies to watch. I wanted to seek out auxiliary materials about the movie industry and how it works and the business side of it, the pre-production, the post-production side of it, reading books about the makings of troubled productions like Heaven's Gate or Apocalypse Now, or watching documentaries. I talk about The Lord of the Rings a lot on the pod that I love to go back and rewatch those movies. But I think I've watched the special features on the extended edition DVDs or Blu-rays more than the actual movies.
Oh, that's neat.
And it's just people in a big warehouse making chainmail out of plastic, or seamstresses making leather armor for horses. All that stuff is very interesting to me.
So cool though, yeah.
But when you say we have a good grasp on what makes a bomb enjoyable or a slog, I used to not torture myself, but really struggle with, why does this movie make me feel this way? Can I verbalize it in a way that's interesting and informative? And I've gotten away from that because I think a lot of my best insights just happen in the moment now.
Nice.
And maybe that's just us being more comfortable being on mic, talking to each other, being willing to say something that's not fully thought out or fleshed out and hope that you get there.
Yeah, I agree with you. A lot of those insights are like intuitions that if you poke at, you can unearth. But I will add that the one thing that I have put some study time into is writing. But just for the last 5-10 years, I was like, oh, could I be a writer? Is there a possibility of a career ahead for me in something that involves writing? So I've been studying screenwriting, comedy writing, novels, all kinds of different stuff, just soaking up a lot of different wisdom on how stories are made. And I'll just shout out one book in particular that's my favorite that I've gone back to and I've read or basically listened to it maybe 5 to 10 times in its entirety. It's called The Secrets of Story by Matt Bird. He was a screenwriter. He's still around. He's a screenwriter and a blogger and an author and a podcaster. And I don't think he made it big as a writer, but he's just got great insights. It really opened my eyes as to the mechanics of how stories work. And early on, coincidentally, there's a part in the book, The Secrets of Story, where Bird skewers Andrew Stanton for just exactly how and how badly he fucked up John Carter. So I took that as a sign early on. This book is a great companion for the podcast, and it's served me well.
Nice. Yeah, I'm looking up this Matt Burr gentleman now. Mayhaps I'll give this a gander as well.
It's good stuff.
Yeah, because sometimes you'll bust out a term like, oh, this is a real save the cat moment. And I'm like, I didn't know that term before you said it, but it's so descriptive that I know exactly what you're talking about without you having to explain it really. Did you ever read the Stephen King on writing?
Yeah, I love that. I read that.
That's a good one.
I read that like years ago before I think I was even entertaining the idea of writing, but just because I loved Stephen King books and there's a lot in there.
Same. I read that as a child and it kind of sparked an interest in writing, which has followed me into my day job. And thanks for the compliment, Matthew, that we sound like we know what we're talking about.
Yeah, thank you for the question and the compliment.
That is never a given. I want to stress that this is a different person. This is Matt.
Okay.
This is not Matthew. Two different listeners.
Sure.
And Matt wanted to know, at what point for each of you does a movie become so bad it's good? And or do you even believe in that being a thing? I definitely do believe in that being a thing, just to get that out of the way.
Yeah, I do. I kind of believe it. Personally, I'll just say I'm so persnickety and like easily annoyed with movies that I'm not one of those people who loves to watch so bad they're good movies. But there are some that I can point to that I enjoy for that kind of reason.
Would you mind
pointing to them right now with my finger?
Yeah.
Like Spaceballs came up recently, which I don't think is so bad, but I thought it was mostly lowbrow and cheesy. And then I got more and more into it. I'm like, oh, the charm started to win me over and I found it quite lovable. Maybe Waterworld is the truest example that I could think of, where I'm like, this is in your face obnoxious for a while. And then there is a tipping point where you're like, oh my God, this is so just dumb and bad that I kind of love it.
Those are both good picks. I have a slightly different approach to a so bad it's good movie. And I think mine is a little more of a generational divide. I answered Matt's question as kind of a two-parter. It was like, what makes a movie so bad it's good?
Yeah.
For me, it has to be made with pure intentions. You need to be trying to do your best.
Okay.
Or it's not fun for me. Like, I don't give a fuck about Sharknado movies.
Right. Yes.
If you made a movie to be stupid, then congratulations, you made a stupid movie.
Right.
If you made a movie because you were trying to make the best movie ever and it's incompetent, that's funny to me. I'm sorry. Like,
that's entertaining. No,
yeah,
you're right.
That's entertaining. And I know these are the ones that get thrown out all the time, but they're the top choices for a reason, like Troll 2 and The Room. They are entertaining. And I think the cutoff point for me just has to be, I have a better time openly mocking this movie than sitting quietly and trying to sincerely watch it and take it all in.
Okay.
So like The Beekeeper, one of my favorite movie-going experience, not movie-going, I didn't see it in theaters, but I had a great time watching The Beekeeper, getting drunk with my friends and just making fun of it. Because every time like he would do something, like the cops would be like, what's he up to? And they're like, he's protecting the hive, sir. It was just like all this kind of like bee-related puns. Or like Madam Web is another one I watched.
Yeah.
You know, like I mentioned it on the episode, I watched it with my friends when it came out and my wife Jamie, and we were drunk and made fun of it a lot. And it was a great time. But then I had to watch Madam Web several times and pay attention to it. And I was like, this is not as fun as it was when I was making fun of it. But yeah, the main thing to me is I really cannot care less than having to watch a movie that somebody made with the idea of we're making a so bad it's good movie. That is less than nothing to me.
Yeah, that's a pretty limiting way to go in.
And I feel like there was a cottage industry based on those in like the 2010s that has mostly died out.
Yeah.
Because like movies are too expensive to make them bad on purpose. You know, like,
yeah.
The kind of film economy doesn't exist anymore. And I think direct to video going away also hurt that a lot, because it's a lot easier to spend $3 renting a movie for the night and then bring it back the next day. You could have made decent profit on that 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah, I think that's probably what funded a certain set of movies, is that you could put a splashy box cover on a video store shelf and make some money.
This is a fun one. I thought about this one a lot.
Okay.
I do love me some pinball. And Tim asked, what movie that you've covered would make a good pinball machine?
Yeah, you guys are the pinball pros. I'm just a dabbler, but it seemed to me that there's quite a few. I wonder if we'll hit any crossovers here. I came in with two.
Okay.
You want me to throw one out there?
Yeah, hit me with one.
I mean, the big bomb right out of the gate, John Carter. Lots of dumb characters, images, things you could make into funny pinball shit.
That's a good one. I did not put that one down, but that's a good choice. I cheated with my first answer. I have 3 answers.
Okay.
My first one was, and I don't really want it to be based on the movie, but I want it to be based on the IP, The Dark Tower.
Ooh, nice.
Because I love The Dark Tower. There's so much you could do with a pinball machine there. The story goes from multiple worlds and planes of existence, and it follows a whole bunch of interesting characters. Not the movie. I'm talking about the books and maybe the Mike Flanagan show if he ever gets to make it. But I think that you could do so much cool stuff with a Dark Tower pinball machine that I would love to see it.
That's a serious entry there. Like you're looking for an actual badass pinball table, whereas my mind went to the trashier, the kind of the campy side of pinball, which I think has a strong place in pinball machines thematically. And so my second pick was Battleship because it's super dumb. Okay. It's all about clanky devices and lights are flashing and things are exploding all over the place. And on top of that, the bad guys in Battleship, if you remember, they shoot those round metal rolly ball things that roll all over the place. Yeah. So what a cool mechanic to try to integrate into a pinball table.
You could also pay homage to the Battleship game. Yeah. Like you have to hit these squares to activate this kind of multi-ball thing or whatever.
Exactly.
Like a direct hit.
Yeah, there's a lot you could do there.
My second answer was more along the lines of theming. Again, this was a really cool concept for a movie that just didn't pay off in execution. So I went Cowboys and Aliens.
Oh, yeah.
Because I think that kind of mix of the Old West and this futuristic sci-fi world could be a really cool theme for a pinball machine.
That's what I was thinking in John Carter, is you bring some of that cowboy stuff and the alien stuff, and it makes for a really visually interesting game with lots of different characters and landscapes and things represented.
Which brings me to my final one.
Okay.
I went Megalopolis.
Wow.
You got to build the city by like hitting these lanes with the Megalon.
Oh my God.
But then maybe there's like a little area called the time stop and the ball just gets stuck there like it's a magnet.
It hangs in midair. Yes, of course.
And like you have to hit some kind of button sequence to unstick it. I don't know. Could be fun.
And you have to go across the catwalks and the tops of buildings without the ball falling off.
And when you hit that little magnet, it just goes, time stop.
I mean, you would pour quarters into that thing just to try to hear that sound.
Exactly. So Francis Ford Coppola, if you want to make your money back for Megalopolis, I think we just figured out how.
Of course, this would need to be an entirely self-funded pinball machine, but he's got one more variety of grape that he hasn't sold off completely.
All right. Well, we got another one from Tim, which is pretty open-ended. What are your favorite horror films of all time and why?
This is fun. This one took me back. I had to do a lot of thinking because I don't think of myself as a horror film tolerator. I appreciate
You're a bit of a scaredy cat.
I'm a scaredy cat.
That's cute, though.
So I picked two movies, two oldies that might be the reason that I'm a scaredy cat. I went with The Exorcist and American Werewolf in London. Both well-liked. These are not hot take picks as great horror movies. They both have certain scenes, certain images that showed me just how scary a movie can be and also how funny. American Werewolf in London, Griffin Dunne in that was like eye-opening to me that, you can do something horrific and funny at the same time.
Oh, I wonder if we'll talk more about Griffin Dunne in the next couple of weeks.
We probably will have to come up with an excuse just to do that.
Yeah, American Werewolf in London, when we see that werewolf with the Chinese menu in his hand walking through the streets of Soho in the rain, I was like, whoa, this is crazy. I've never seen that movie.
Yeah, I'm trying to get you to watch that movie because even though you're a major John Landis hater, it's worth watching.
He's just a bad person.
I know. It sucks.
Not my fault. Yeah, those are both great. The Exorcist is an all-timer. Truly a great movie. And I would also like to shout out The Exorcist 3 as being
I've heard of this.
A super underrated entry. But maybe it's because I pick the movies we cover, but I feel like I've been lucky enough to talk about a lot of my favorite horror movies on the podcast.
Yeah.
If I had to pick one horror movie that's my favorite, it's got to be The Thing.
Oh, nice.
Because that's like in my top 5 movies.
Yeah.
But also Event Horizon is way up there for me. Cabin in the Woods is way up there for me.
Cool.
And if I wanted to expand on that, whether or not you believe Silence of the Lambs is a horror movie or like a crime thriller, I would say that's definitely up there if you count it in the horror genre.
Sure.
Because I'm a big sucker for procedurals and that movie just does it really well. It's horrific, but also like you're going on this journey with Clarice and seeing how she works in her mind. And I wouldn't say this is my favorite horror movie of all time, but I just got to shout out Frailty, which is a movie I fucking love. Directed by Bill Paxton, of all people.
I did not know that.
And he's also in it with Matthew McConaughey. It's like a religious horror. It is phenomenal, creepy, understated, terrifically acted. Just a super kind of classic, forgotten horror movie of the early 2000s.
That's super cool. That's like a totally fresh tip for me. I'm going to have to check it out.
And I think you would like it too, because it's not very jump scary or gory either. It's
cool.
More creepy than anything.
Yeah, I like those.
And so any listeners that are looking for a fun horror movie, not fun, it's pretty upsetting,
but
it's very well made. And then along those same lines, because most vampire movies are also horror movies, listener Gary asked our best and worst vampire movies. Why don't you hit me with one of your best, then I'll hit you with one of my best, and then we'll go back and forth.
Sure. This is a big category. I picked one best, and it's still like a maybe because there's a lot of cool movies in this genre. I went with Let the Right One In.
Oh, good one.
I don't think I've revisited it since I watched it, except to watch the remake, which I thought was good, but not as good.
That seems to be the consensus. Not bad, but not up to the level.
Not up to the level. That movie was like so cool cool because it was like a touching indie drama. At the same time, it was a vampire story and like a satisfying one with cool genre shit with the fun of how she feeds and all that stuff. So it was kind of like transcended the horror genre a little bit, but really worked as a cool contemporary vampire movie.
Great choice. I really do enjoy Let the Right One In. And I also enjoyed Let Me In, but yeah, not quite as much.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is a hot take or not. I think this movie's pretty well liked. It got mixed reviews at the time and it wasn't a huge hit, but I think its estimation has just gone up since then. I picked 30 Days of Night.
Oh, yeah.
Which is the Josh Hartnett Alaskan vampire movie where he's in one of those parts of Alaska where they have the polar night that lasts 30 days. So might be a good place for some vampires to hang out because they don't have to worry about the sunshine and all the kind of challenges that entails. And really well made, well directed. Danny Huston is terrifying in it. Or I don't know if it's Houston.
I don't know.
He's the big bad Marlowe. One of the scarier big bad vampires I can name off the top of my head. And I really thought David Slade was going to be like the next big thing. He started off his career with Hard Candy and 30 Days of Night, which are two pretty phenomenal horror movies. And then he kind of fell off after that, but he did direct the pretty good Dark Harvest in 2023. So that was a recent one that I thought was pretty interesting. So you only had one choice for best, right?
I had one best. I have some mediums and then I picked one worst, but I realized in looking through this category, there's a bunch of movies that I know are super beloved that I haven't watched. So I made a note. Oh, I got to watch Lost Boys. I got to watch the original Fright Night. I got to go back and watch Salem's Lot.
Salem's Lot fucking rips, but that's a mini series, so I don't know if it counts.
Okay.
Yeah, before you get into your mediums, Near Dark was my second choice. The directorial debut of one Catherine Bigelow, truly one of our most talented filmmakers. And we can cover it, I realized when I was making this list. I was like, oh shit, Near Dark was a bomb. So next Blast Over, keep your eyes peeled. It's coming.
Oh, that's awesome. I've heard about it and wanted to check it out before. So that'll be really cool to have a reason to dig into it.
Yeah, so give me your medium.
My medium was Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula. Bram Stoker's Dracula, which a lot of people seem to crap on that movie because it was like slightly cheesy, but I really enjoyed the interpretations of all the elements from the classic Dracula. I don't know. I liked how they all worked. I even liked Keanu in that. I liked Oldman in that. I
think his accent is where people made fun of that movie.
But I ended up loving how it worked for the Jonathan Harker character, who's supposed to be this rube, this sort of goofball who gets sucked into this really tragic, awful shit. And it worked for me.
It's been a long time since I've seen it, but I do remember Oldman being really good as Dracula and pretty terrifying.
Yeah, it's a good one.
It is a good one. Are you ready to move on to the worst?
Yeah, I went for an easy target.
You went Twilight?
I went Morbius.
Oh, I always forget that Morbius is a vampire because he only eats like one person in that whole movie.
I know, he's kind of a comic book vampire, but I went back to our notes and our discussion of Morbius, and it truly was awful in places. It was self-serious and pompous and unaware of its own cringe factor, but still, I found a bunch of things to like about it, so I'm almost putting that in the so bad it's good category.
Oh, Morbius for me definitely falls into the so bad it's good. I think that's a fun movie to watch. But I had a couple.
It's here.
I had the Twilight series.
Sure.
They're easy targets, I know, but more so because you don't have to be a slave to the tropes of vampire stories to make a vampire story, but you have to know what they are and at least nod towards them. Like these vampires have no relation to what we've come to understand as vampires, you know?
Oh, okay. I'm only aware of the posters, the memes maybe, but I really know nothing about Twilight.
No, I think I definitely saw the first two. I don't know if I saw all of them, but like they can go out in the sun and be fine. They just sparkle.
I knew that they sparkled, but I didn't know what the significance of that was.
And like they live near Seattle because it's always cloudy, so they don't have to worry. Like I was like, yeah, shut the fuck up. So that's an easy target. My other ones that are maybe a little more forgotten are the Aaliyah vampire movie, Queen of the Damned. Which I somehow saw in theaters and was terrible. And the Hugh Jackman, Kate Beckinsale, Van Helsing from the mid-aughts.
Yeah.
Which stay tuned for that pile of shit because we're going to have to talk about it someday.
Van Helsing turns up in that book, The Secrets of Story, as another example of some don'ts in writing characters. So I've always been curious about it, but I never got around to watching it.
Maybe we'll do that and Jonah Hex as like a 1-2 punch.
Oh boy.
The worst of the monster hunting genre from the aughts. Fuck that movie. All right, another one. Let's get ready to shit on some movies. Tim wants to know, what is your least favorite comic book movie and why?
Do you want me to go first or you want to take a crack at this one?
I'll go first. You've been going first a lot.
Okay.
Let me give you some runway. I thought about this one for a while, and then when the answer came to me, I was like, what were you doing spending all that time on the easiest question anyone's ever asked you? The answer is absolutely Dark Phoenix.
Oh, okay.
The final X-Men movie before they got absorbed into the MCU, which we still have not seen them fully take part in an MCU film, we've seen standalone characters here and there.
That's right.
Doctor Strange and a Deadpool. And there's a couple reasons why this is the runaway answer for me. The biggest factor is in my attachment to the original story.
Okay. Yeah.
The X-Men were always my favorite comic book to read. I read them religiously. I've read just about everything up until the late aughts, maybe, and then a couple spots here and there. And actually, Tim, who wrote this question, gave me a graphic novel of some of their more recent stuff that was really good.
Oh, neat.
But the Dark Phoenix story is just so important. It's such a big part of my childhood. Not only the comic that I read, which was Chris Claremont and was like my first exposure to a space opera told in a comic book, but then the animated series had a long arc about the Dark Phoenix storyline that was very popular and very well done, which I also really resonated with. And for whatever reason, it cannot be done in a live action movie successfully because Brett Ratner tried to do it with The Last Stand, the third X-Men movie. And then I guess they thought enough people had forgotten and tried to make a whole movie out of it. And it was fucking terrible. And also I was saving it for our 200th episode. It was a huge bomb as well. Lost a ton of money.
Okay. That's fun because I think I tried to watch it once. And like you, I had an attachment. Like I remember collecting those X-Men when they were coming out, when Phoenix was losing their shit. And they were super cool. That was a golden, maybe not technically the golden age of comics.
Not the golden age, but a golden age.
But a golden age for comics. They were doing serious stuff, like really gripping characters and storylines. And yeah, it's sad that it got butchered on film.
Yeah, what do you got for me?
I went with Batman and Robin. We covered it on the show. For those who don't recall, it's the Joel Schumacher one with Clooney as Batman. It's got Arnold in it.
Uma Thurman.
Alicia Silverstone. I checked my notes on this one. Apparently, I was fed up with that movie after watching one scene. So that reminded me how bad it was. It was just super, super dumb. I was comparing the sort of clunkiness of the writing in it to The Room. That was the level that it achieved. Except I think the reason it was more maddening than obviously watching The Room we just talked about is fun and entertaining. This had Hollywood's biggest stars like saying the dumbest lines. And it was like, why didn't you write a script for these people if you're going to invest all this effort and money into it? And so it was just a frustrating and embarrassing experience.
I think I told this story on the podcast when we were covering it, but I saw Batman and Robin in theaters, and it was the first time I'd ever realized I was watching a bad movie while I was watching it. I was like 11 years old, maybe 10 or 11. And I was like, why am I not having a good time? Because everything I'd seen up until that point, I'd loved. And every time I'd been to the movie theater, I had a great time up until that point. And I was just so confused. I was like, they can just do that? They can just make a movie that's bad? You still have to pay money to watch it? Like, how is this possible?
Schumacher broke the heart of an innocent child on that day. It's a tragedy.
And then it was a couple more years of smooth sailing. And then The Phantom Menace came out and I had a similar epiphany, but then I was just cynical for the rest of my life after that.
This happened to me before. I remember.
Fool me twice. Shame on you. Yeah, no, good choice. Batman and Robin, just a complete misfire. And everyone involved seems to acknowledge it and apologize for it.
Yeah.
All right. We got two more. One of them is literally just for you.
Okay.
We got two more before we get to the finals. These are more personal questions. When was the last time you were on a boat? Matt wants to know.
Thank you for asking this, Matt. This is a big question for me. Just to be very upfront and honest, it's been too long. I'm a little bit of a fraud as a mariner, but think about it. If I had the sea, I would not have to yearn for the sea. It's been 10 years since I took my one and only legit sailing trip. Came aboard with my uncle. We sailed up Puget Sound across the Strait of San Juan de Fuca, made land on the fabled Orcas Island. It was quite an epic journey. Since then, I got in a kayak in Clinton, Connecticut one time 5 years ago. And that's all I have to show for it.
Was that the time you were in Connecticut that we met up?
It might have been.
We weren't ready to go on boating trips together yet, though.
We weren't at the boating level in our relationship yet, but whenever this comes up, I go back to the first chapter of Moby Dick, which is maybe a main reason why I have a yearning for the sea, and that Ishmael, the main character, so eloquently explains the virtues of going to sea, sailing about a little and seeing the watery part of the world, as he says, as a way of driving off the spleen. And to justify my longing for the sea despite not having done that, unlike Ishmael or his author, Herman Melville, who actually did go to sea, he gives you a little out at the end of that chapter. He says, if they but knew it, almost all men in their degree, sometime or other, cherish very nearly the same feelings towards the ocean with me. And he was right. That feeling is in me. Someday I may exercise it again.
Well said, Ian. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would just like to add that if we are counting jet skis, that I was on one several times this past summer.
Nice. I'm jealous.
So suck it. All right. The next one is mostly for me, but I would certainly welcome your input as well, Ian.
Sure.
Van very flatteringly writes, John's commentary on nachos opened my eyes. I had no idea there were so many apparent variations. What is the best place for nachos you've ever eaten at? So I've got a couple answers, as you might expect from a man who has dedicated so much of his life to nachos.
As I would hope, yeah.
My first and truest answer is Phoebe's in Manhattan in the Bowery is my favorite plate of nachos that I've ever had, for both the fact that it's a phenomenal plate of nachos and for sentimental reasons. So the nacho crawls started as a gift to my best man at my wedding, who is the aforementioned Craig. I took him to a Ranger game. Then we moseyed about Manhattan trying all the best nacho places because nachos have always been a favorite food of mine. It was just two of us. So as you can imagine, we were not able to hit the number of nacho places that we currently do.
Okay, yeah.
But we got to like 6 or 7, which is a lot for one day.
That's a lot.
And we were miserably full by the end of it. But we went to the Phoebe's and it was already like turning into a bit of a club scene at that time because it was like getting late. It was like after 10 and the music was bumping and nobody else was like sitting down and having a meal. But we sat down and got a plate of nachos and we still, as full and miserable as we were like, these are the best ones we had.
Wow.
And I've been back since because they're actually a Cincinnati Bengals bar. And as a Bengals fan who lived in New York for the vast majority of my life, there's not a lot of places to go and watch the game.
Oh, that's neat.
They actually do get like the Skyline chili. You can have that, but I just get nachos because they're the best. But then there was a crawl in Buffalo, New York. We went to Coulter Bay.
Okay.
Great nachos, some of my faves. And then I had to shout out Zivio in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Their Mediterranean nachos were top notch. Almost everyone in my party agreed they were some of the best ones we'd ever had when we went there.
I remember you calling those out. Are those made with pita instead of tortilla chip?
They sure are. Yeah, that's right. I did tell you all about those.
I think I've seen a photo of those nachos. They were a hit, clearly.
Absolutely. What about you? Do you have a favorite nacho spot in your neighborhood or just somewhere you've been?
You know, I couldn't come up with one. I'm a big fan of the eating of the nachos, but I'm really a babe in the nacho woods. I'm a not child when it comes to that. So I don't have any relevant experience, but I do know the rule that one person can't just eat all the fully loaded nachos. So I'm ready to respectfully join any nacho crawl that I might be invited on.
Yeah. I don't know if you want to fly out to Des Moines, Iowa, but we'll be going in May. But no, we are in the early stages of planning one in the Los Angeles area. So
that'll be cool. I will be discovering along with you the best nachos in LA one day.
Absolutely. And then for the final question of the Blast Me Anything mailbag episode, we have one from Joe who asks, if either of you gentlemen, using that word very loosely, could pick one movie that you've done an episode on that you could see in the theaters and your ticket alone grossed $200 million, what movie would it be? And this is the one where we actually did come up with the same answer.
Yeah.
It wasn't even a hard one to come up with.
No, it was really obvious that we were both going to pick The Nice Guys.
The Nice Guys. Yep. It's just the most delightful movie I can think of. Such a fun time. And it ends on like a setup for a sequel.
It's a perfect setup. They print their little flyer. They come together and form a business at the end. It's clearly made to have sequels. And that's really what the 200 million instant box office would do, would be like guarantee that they would make another movie so that we would show up with our $200 million ticket for the next one.
So we'd actually be giving them $400 million.
we'd have to scrape up that big golden ticket again to make it worthwhile for them.
Yeah.
The thing that's so frustrating about The Nice Guys is like we covered a bunch of other bombs that are now considered classics: Shawshank, Spinal Tap, Fight Club, Princess Bride, Children of Men. Like there's an endless list of those like really great movies that we had to cover.
Scott Pilgrim.
Yeah, but for the most part, all of those have, since their original time, have been elevated. They've been celebrated. The Nice Guys still feels like it's under-recognized. How could it not have been huge? Why doesn't everybody know and love this movie? And it's a real source of frustration.
Yeah, absolutely. There is no other movie I can think of where if I'm having a bad day and I just need to put something on that's going to make me smile, nothing even comes close to The Nice Guys.
Great.
It's just, it just checks every box for me. But because we came up with the same answer, we thought it would be a good idea to have a backup ready as well.
Yeah.
And mine is going to be Danny Boyle's Sunshine.
That is a really interesting pick.
And not because Danny, like I want to get him out of director jail. He's obviously still been working and having great success since then. But that kind of adult, serious, hard sci-fi that's not attached to any IP is just very hard to get made. And at that level with that kind of cast, Cillian Murphy, Chris Evans, like just these big name actors, these big name directors putting their all into it and making a serious movie for serious people. I just think if Sunshine had made $200 million more, maybe we would have gotten a handful of movies in that vein that would have just enriched our lives.
Yeah, we're imagining that golden ticket as more than just a literal funneling cash to the movie. It's like by cashing in that ticket, it's creating the atmosphere where that equivalent amount of people went to see the movie, which is what we would hope to have this audience for that kind of movie show up and encourage more of those to get made, which would be great.
Yeah, we're trying to consider the ramifications of these movies being $200 million more successful than they were originally.
Yeah.
And how it would ripple throughout the industry. And what was your backup choice?
My runner-up was Dungeons & Dragons, Honor Among Thieves, which I think we both agreed was just really funny. Just a delightful movie in every way, and just a shame and a mystery like The Nice Guys. Like, why didn't this catch fire? Why wasn't this universally loved?
Yeah, it was almost universally loved by everyone who saw it. The problem was just the amount of people that saw it was lower than it should have been. But there's always rumblings about a sequel, which I have my doubts considering how little money it made. But so fucking funny.
Yeah.
Just hilarious. I might rewatch it now.
I kind of want to go put both those funny movies on. Like, Sunshine is a serious, heady, dark, spooky movie, which is cool and it's badass. But those other ones are like, somehow us promoting them with our magic ticket feels like you're really putting happiness into the world, which is something we would like to have the power to do.
Well said. Thanks, Ian. And thank you to all the listeners who wrote in questions. Really appreciate it. These are super fun to do.
Yeah.
We won't do them too often because that's not what the podcast is, but it's great to do it on occasion, especially after, like we said, January was we haven't done weekly episodes in a while, and January was pretty tiring.
It was a little boot camp. It was like making a New Year's resolution, like, oh, we're going to get in shape. And we're like, oh shit, we're in boot camp. We got to wake up at 6 a.m. every morning and grind out some movies in the wet, cold sand.
And they were all bad, which didn't help. We didn't cover a good movie in all of January. Speaking of which, we should talk about what the next episode's going to be. It is actually a good movie for once.
Yeah.
We're doing After Hours, the Scorsese flop from the 80s.
It's something I've been meaning to catch up on for a while. Like, I was a Scorsese fan in my youth from the moment Goodfellas registered in my consciousness. And this one has flown under the radar for a long time. So it's really fun to come around to it. And it's going to be really cool to talk about.
Yeah. Another kind of cult classic that seems to have gotten its moment in the sun in the late 2010s, early 2020s. Super different movie than I was expecting. I had seen it years ago, rewatched it already one time, and it'll be interesting to talk about. It's a weird one.
It's quirky.
Thanks so much for listening. You guys can rate, review, subscribe to the pod on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all the usual spots. Write in if you have any other questions, feedback, movie suggestions, just want to chat. We're at blastzonepod@gmail.com. Follow us on the socials, Twitter @blastzonepod, Blue Sky, the whole thing, blastzonepod.bluesky, whatever.
Doot.
And we'll see you next time in the Blast Zone.
See you next time in the Blast Zone.
The Blast Zone.